Hey guys, it's John here from Ecommerce SEO. Just wanted to talk about in this video an element of starting with a new site, whether it's an ecom site or any site for that matter, and what is known as the Google Sandbox. Google will say or deny that the Google Sandbox actually exists, and essentially what it is, it's all an anecdotal evidence from people like myself and people who start new sites and start many new sites, where you buy a new domain, you get your website up and running, you start optimizing your site and running your SEO campaigns, and it seems like you get stuck in a holding pattern for a number of months, and this can be sometimes it can be up to a year. Now, as I mentioned, Google denies that this actually happens. But I was listening to another well-known YouTube channel on SEO this morning, and they were talking about just that, the Google Sandbox, and that they also see that it's a real thing. Now, I see it pretty well every new site we work with. It happens where you get your site up, you start doing the work, you might see a little bit of gain and things starting to look good, and then all of a sudden either you'll plateau or you might pull right back. And even for experienced SEOs like myself and other big guys around the industry, it can be a little bit disheartening, and you kind of wonder whether you're doing something wrong. So a classic is you might build a link or a number of different links, and all of a sudden you get a pullback in those first 6 months. And so what you do, human instinct, you go and actually remove that link, and you might see a rebound, and then you think, well, actually, I've done the right thing. I've removed the link, and that's what was causing the problem. But what you really have to do is focus on that compounding of your work. So assume that your site is going to be put in the sandbox, and you'll start doing work, and things won't actually happen, and you might even get a pullback, as I mentioned, but you've just got to continue on and ignore that. It might seem like you're in the sandbox. What the assumption is that when there was, and they're still around, there was a lot of spammers trying to push sites to the top of the search engines with spam software or really, really black hat practices, even though I'm not really one for thinking of SEO as either black hat, white hat, or grey hat. Essentially, good SEOs do what works in that period of time. But there's an assumption that the sandbox was brought into the algorithm to stop spammers. So they found that generally, if someone tried to spam a site to the top of the search engines, they'd give up after a number of months, or 4 to 6 months if it wasn't working. So the thought is that they brought it in to try and knock out those spammers before they even got to that point. And you can see here, I've just put over an article from Search Engine Watch, and this article was from earlier this year, so July 2019, talking about whether the sandbox still exists. And you can see here that John Mueller from Google actually says we don't have a sandbox, don't worry about it. That's fine. Google can say what they want and say that there isn't a sandbox, but we see something is happening where new sites do get put into essentially a holding pattern where they don't move or they pull back a little bit. And there is also the school of thought which makes sense that a brand new site doesn't have the relevance or the authority of an older site. So it would make sense that they're not going to do as well until Google starts to trust that site over time. And here's another quote by Matt Cutts. My answer is not to worry that much. The difference between a domain that's 6 months old versus 1 year old is not really that big at all. I'll show you that graph in a second, that's not always the case. So as long as you've been around for at least a couple of months, a few months, you should be able to make sure that you're able to show up in the search results. And certainly that's not what we see. So again, it depends on the competition, but there is a pretty significant amount of brand new sites that we see that struggle to push past page 5, 4, or 3 in the first 6 months. So what we do is we obviously make sure our ecom stores are optimized on page first, and then we start building. The first thing we start doing is building the brand entity. So we make sure we have our social profiles up and organized. If we've got a YouTube channel, that's optimized and correctly set up. All our schema is correctly tied in together, both on site and off site. We make sure we add our site to relevant industry directories. If it's a fashion ecom store, for example, we will make sure that that site is in the local country of origin fashion directories, which there are many in most cases. And then typically this is what we see. So this is one of our own sites. Now this term that you're looking at, this is a phrase in the Australia market. It's not huge. It's the broad term that gets around about 1,500 to 2,000 searches per month nationally. But then with all the variations of the terms and the long tails and everything else, it's upwards of 50,000 searches per month. So it's quite a good term for the ecom market. So you can see here, and this is actually when we only put it into our rank tracking software, and this is Rank Tracker we use, which was in middle of August in 2019. We actually built the site in June, so we only put it in the Rank Tracker. So you can see here, we're doing all our branding process here. We get a few little spikes with the term pushing up to sort of, around about the top of page 4, and then we get a pullback over a month. And again, this is quite disheartening when you see this, but from experience we know just to stick it out, keep doing our work as we would normally, and we'll see a rebound. So from August, September, October, November, so runs through to the end of October, and then at the start of November this year, so in this month we're talking about, only the last 5 or 6 days, we see this crazy spike from in the 90s all the way up to position 11. I think it's sitting at now. So, and then all the other terms associated with that have pretty well done the same. There's some that are lagging, have pretty well had that same process. So they were back it down here, and now they're all starting to push up in these last 6 or 7 days. So my point with all this is, let the compound process work when you're starting out with a brand new site. Assume that you're not going to get any organic traffic for the first 4 to 6 months. And that seems like a long time when you're first starting out, but you're going to have more than enough to do to worry about that. What you should be also doing is running other traffic sources to your new site, Facebook advertising, Instagram, running Google ads, etc. Email if you've got a list. Run that traffic, which is going to help your site rank by getting that traffic in anyway, and be patient with the organic traffic coming in. And this is the other reason why it's really difficult for most people to get their head around SEO when they first jump into it. It doesn't happen overnight. I don't care who you are, what SEO you are. You might be able to spam a site to the top in a month or 2 months. Great. But tell me if you're there in 12 months' time. And if you do it this way, you will be. If you're spamming sites, it'll catch up with you at some point in time. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Just a little bit of perspective on the Google Sandbox. Thanks. We'll see you in the next video.